We're now live. How are you doing today? Is that a trick question?
No.
I feel like you've been on the phone all day, but you've been, we're about to make a partial move to Florida. We're still gonna live in New York City, but we're checking out Florida for a little bit.
Yeah.
Key Biscayne, and you've been organizing the computers and internet access. You can't move anywhere without internet access, without being fully connected to the planet.
Right.
So you never actually leave behind anything because there's always the internet to catch up to you right away. Oh, hello people. Hello Mira. Hello Brock. Hello everybody. Murray, Max. Hopefully Jay soon. And so somebody, by the way, I don't know if you know this, somebody said something nasty about me on Twitter.
Wow, I know, I saw that.
Someone said, someone named, I don't think this is their real name, Ursula Lepik, obviously not their real name. They said, bro, it's so incredible how much of a lazy, useless piece of shit you are. Just astounding how somebody like you wasn't immediately aborted when your friends could obviously tell you would be a brain-dead fuckhead for your entire life. It's actually very creative. Like, he really kind of tries to hit a home run with that one. And, you know, just so he knows, I'm old enough that I was born before Roe versus Wade. So possibly, and honestly, it wouldn't have mattered to me. My parents maybe would have had an abortion if they knew what a brain-dead fuckhead I was going to be. But they couldn't because Roe versus Wade happened 4 years after I was born. And now, again, it would not have mattered to me in the slightest because if I was never born, I wouldn't know. I can't sit. I never like it like, oh, I'm so grateful. You know, if it wasn't for, you know, if Roe versus Wade had never been passed, I never would have been born. Like, so you wouldn't have known, you wouldn't have cared, and nobody else would have cared. Nobody would have ever said, oh, it's too bad James wasn't around, because they wouldn't even know that I had the opportunity to exist. So, you ever have an abortion?
Yeah, I did actually.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that. We learn something new every day. I'm sorry, did I just ask you a bad question?
No.
Okay, it's good to be.
I did tell you so.
I totally forgot.
Yeah.
I've been responsible for two myself, you know, unfortunately, but also fortunately for Roe versus Wade, people have a choice, and this is what happens. So, look, we learn things new every day.
That's right.
I'm gonna bring this a little closer, which means it's probably gonna drop, but I want to make sure you are seen. So, by the way, I don't know where your pajamas are, but we both decided, yesterday we went to a comedy show. So Stand Up New York opened up for it was the very first comedy show in New York City since the lockdown. We opened up on 78th Street and we had a show on the street, and there was like an amazing lineup of comedians and then me as well. And there was an audience. It was like 50 people, wouldn't you say, in the audience, and people passing by, another 100 or so people passing by. And we were about an hour into the show when the police said, hey, you're not allowed to be open up yet. You have to shut this down. Can we just have 3 more comedians go? 20 minutes. And they said, no, you have to shut down right now. No business is allowed to be open. Meanwhile, and I'm not saying this is bad or good, but how many thousands of people were not social distancing in the middle of the night last night in New York City, you know, protesting?
Right.
Was there any looting in New York City last night? I haven't read the news really.
I don't know. I haven't read that either. I've been busy on the phone.
Getting our computers and phone lines and internet connections. So, you know, obviously, here's the thing. There are many different factions involved in this protesting. And obviously, not a single person disagrees with the fact that George Floyd was a horrible murder, death, and it was symptomatic of a lot of systemic racism that not only occurs in law enforcement, but in every area of American life. But then the question remains, like, there's so many people angry that there's other factions involved. There are people who are angry and frustrated because they're among the 40 million people who have filed for unemployment. So people say, oh, a common thing is you bring up unemployment and people say, oh, would you rather people go back to work and die Well, obviously not, but it does see, you look at all the states, every single state that has been reopened for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, like Georgia, Texas, their number of cases continue to go down. And everyone says, oh, just you see in another 2 weeks. Well, they've been saying that every 2 weeks for the past 8 weeks, and the number of cases are going down. So the virus, this wave of the virus is over. And, Trump is saying things like, you need to bring out the National Guard and the military. And I guess you do if people are killing each other and looting stores and stuff like that. But credit to the protesters who are insisting to other people not to loot. I mean, there were some protesters kind of, preventing people, other protesters from looting. But there does seem to be multiple factions here. There's the people who are upset about George Floyd. There are people who are probably upset and angry because they've lost their jobs and this pandemic. There are people who have other agendas. It seems, I don't know if this is a conspiracy theory or not. Is it true that there's like undercover cops involved in these?
You're asking me that?
Yeah, because you were the one telling me.
Well, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think they're trying to figure out. I don't know. I don't know anything about
What were you reading though?
I can't remember because that was, I don't know, 2 days ago. There's so many things that
so many things have happened since then. And well, again, there's probably a lot of different factions involved in these protests, and the problem is there's no clear way it's going to end. Like the last 2 times that there have been protests this large. Hey, hello from LA, because I was about to say the last time there was a protest this significant and with such impact was 1992, the Rodney King riots in LA. And how did those riots stop? They stopped when Rodney King himself said, can't we all just get along? And that sort of calmed the tensions. What was the last time there was rioting before that at such a significant level was 1968. In April 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and, there was rioting that night. Rioting erupted in every single city in the United States. It was bigger rioting than what's been occurring here. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had just started running for president. He was in Indianapolis, and all his campaign workers said, don't go outside, they'll kill you. But he went outside, he stood up and he spoke, and he calmed the riots down. He said, I understand if you're angry. I too have had a member of my family killed by a white man. And when he gave that speech, that basically calmed down all the tensions. And now in this riot, I don't really know what voice of leadership is out there to kind of calm things down. I mean, it doesn't seem like Joe Biden or President Trump or other leaders have that kind of voice. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like a Robert F. Kennedy, like a hero kind of voice, like
Right.
a profile in courage.
Like someone they trust.
Yeah, and even like if you look at civil rights leaders like Al Sharpton, it's almost gleeful when he tweets like, "Oh, I'm going to be giving the eulogy at George Floyd's funeral." Like he doesn't have to brag about it. Like it feels like he's some civil rights leaders I think are very sincere and authentic and want to help the situation. I'm not sure. I don't really know. He hasn't always been the most sincere. Maybe he is more now. But I'm not so sure he has the kind of voice that can stop this. I do think what does stop this is if governors and Trump and whoever were to say, hey, the economy should be reopened right now. I think if everybody had a reason, a purpose, other than just sitting in their home, the economy would completely be reopened instead of like, we always say like, oh, Texas is reopened, but there's still, some things are closed. There's capacity limits in restaurants. A restaurant can't survive if they're only allowed to have 25% full. And even last night when we were trying to do the comedy show and the cops stopped it, everybody was socially distanced. Nobody was, hurting society at all. People were sitting down. It wasn't like they were running around causing problems. So.
No, it's very, very sad what's happening right now. I don't know. I mean, maybe someone like Eric Adams. I mean, he was beaten up by the police when he was young, and then he became a policeman, and now he's the Brooklyn Borough president, running for mayor. I mean, maybe someone like Eric stepping up and being involved. I mean, I know he's involved. I mean, he's been sleeping at his office.
Yeah.
For the last few months, just working on this day and night. But it's going to have to be someone like him, that has a connection with both and has been in both sides,
Yeah, so Eric Adams, he's the Brooklyn Borough president. He's been on my podcast. If all the boroughs of New York City were cities instead of boroughs, then Brooklyn would be the third largest city in the United States after Los Angeles and Chicago, and then Brooklyn would be the most populated, third most populated city in the United States. And Eric won the presidency of Brooklyn with almost 92% of the vote, and now he's running for mayor in 2021. He was in law enforcement for 22 years. He's an African American. When he was a kid, he was beaten up by police. He and his brother were beaten up by police. His brother went one direction. He went in another and studied hard, became a police officer. And he really fought for humane treatment by law enforcement to all races and mentally ill and so on. And he really did a great job, which propelled him to the state senate in New York. Now he's the Brooklyn Borough president. We'll see, of course, but he's our choice for mayor. It's the only election we've ever really cared about is the mayor of... Local is so much more important than national. Eric would be... de Blasio has just been such a failure as a mayor. And New York City is such an important city. It is the capital of the financial world, and we'll see if it continues that way. I don't know how many people are going to be so eager to move to New York City, but Eric would be a great mayor of New York City, and he's an independent thinker.
And he's a great leader. I mean, and he does what he preaches. I mean, he's a doer, and he's great at all levels, So he just cares about people.
Yeah.
I can tell.
Yeah, no, he's a good guy. Maybe you're right. Maybe he should go. He should go where the protests are and tell his story. He was beaten up by police and he survived. And maybe he's going to be a future president of the United States. So we'll see. Yeah. But what else happened this weekend? Oh, so I'm wearing pajamas because why not? Like I think people got used to the fact that, hey, if we work, we have to wear these uncomfortable suits. Like a tie is almost like this virtual way of hanging yourself. Like if you go like this, you just hung yourself. So I don't know why people wear these, and suits are like so uncomfortable. Like you never wore a suit, but they're like really uncomfortable. You wear uncomfortable clothes too. Women have to wear uncomfortable dresses all the time or whatever it is. And why not now in the new normal? Why not screw it? Call it the new abnormal and just say, hey, I want to wear the most comfortable clothes all the time. I never want to wear uncomfortable clothes. Well, pajamas, almost by definition, because you can fall asleep in them, they're the most comfortable clothes I have are pajamas. And so this was your idea to get these pajamas and just wear them all the time. I'm never wearing daytime clothes again. I'm just going to always be I'm going to wear. So last night at the comedy show, I wore slippers and I wore my pajamas. And it was great. What else about these pajamas are interesting?
Well, they're infused with copper.
Infused with copper. Have you ever wore clothes that were infused with copper? Why are they infused with copper?
Because copper kills coronavirus or any viruses.
Really?
And bacteria.
It's totally antiviral.
Well, yes. Very much so.
Or at least antibacterial.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's why, for instance, copper, silver, and gold are all antibacterial, maybe antiviral, and that's why you use silverware. Why don't you use goldware? Because it's too expensive. Silver is like 1/60th the price of gold. How come you have silver cavities and not gold? It's because gold's too expensive. But your cavities are made out of silver because of this antibacterial quality. Otherwise, your teeth would get infected. The goal of the silver is to remove the infection.
But there's a difference. So
Tell me.
Silver works only if it's moist. Okay? But copper works even if it's dry.
Really?
Yes. So a long time ago, when all these old, buildings were built, a lot of the door handles and things were copper, and they've taken a lot of that away.
How come?
I don't know, maybe they're using it for something else. They melt it and use it. But that's all antibacterial and viral too. So a lot of the hospitals are now putting sheets and blankets that are, infused with copper in them.
Well, I kind of want everything all copper.
I
And we
know.
should have little logos here, some stripes. Like, we should have like real fashion design around
Yeah.
these copper infused clothes.
Right.
Then you don't have, maybe I wouldn't have to wear a mask. I could just go to the store. Hey, everyone says, "Where's your mask?" Don't worry about it. This is copper infused clothes. I'm propelling. The coronavirus hates me now because it's seeing my clothes and it's like, the glare of the copper infused pajamas is too great.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that when the virus or the bacteria touch the copper, it melts the membrane of it, so it completely destroys it. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well,
Pretty cool.
so where can you get clothes like this? Where did you order this?
It's in England.
Just Google
Just have to-
copper infused pajamas,
Yeah.
and you'll get it.
And sheets, they have them.
Yeah?
Yeah.
By the way, I just a little brief election thing on predicted.org. I noticed today, this is the first time I've ever seen Biden take over as the potential winner in the election. So people were predicting, so a few weeks ago, Trump will win contracts for trading for 50 cents a share, and Biden was trading for 43 cents a share. Now it's about 50 Biden, 49 Trump was the last time I saw it.
That's crazy.
So I don't know what I don't know why the riots would change things, and I'm not for. I just sort of feel like, one of my podcast guests recently referred to it as one big party, the Republicrats, and I don't really want any of the Republicrats. Like, it's as this guy put it. This is his words, not mine. You have two 75-year-old alleged rapists running for president, and that's our only choice. Like, out of all the Democrats, 60 million Democrats, Biden was the number one, the first choice among all of them. Yeah. And out of all 60 million Republicans, Trump was the first choice. And those are our only choices. You can't even get on the ballot in 50 states.
So you have to wonder why, though. Why is he, out of all the people? But there has to be, there's the real reason, right, that you would say?
Yeah, there's a real reason and the good reason. So the real reason is he won the elections in the primaries. But what might be... the good reason is he won all the elections in the primaries.
What's the real reason?
And people say he was the safest choice. Like, let's say he was running against Bernie Sanders. Everyone was a little nervous Bernie Sanders was too much to the left so that they wouldn't get donations from Wall Street, hedge fund managers, and so on. But I don't know, the real reason might be that he was the vice president for 8 years under Obama. Maybe Obama pulled strings in the Democratic machine to kind of get the super delegates to call up all the governors and get
the whole thing is that the machine is broken. I mean, this is what's happening. Everything is falling apart. And why would we want to put somebody that's been in that machine? Like, I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem like that's the solution.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. Maybe that's why I like local politics. Whoever is mayor of New York City has a much greater effect on my life than whoever is president of the United States. Like, unless you're like a kid being sent to war, the president of the United States really has very little effect on your life. Like, in the Constitution, the president can veto legislation from Congress, something that they rarely ever do. A president can make foreign treaties, but the Congress still has to approve of the treaties. So the president can make a treaty, but it's useless unless Congress approves it. The president can meet foreign dignitaries or go to funerals. Mm-hmm. And there's not really that many the president can appoint justices to the Supreme Court, but then Congress has to approve them. But there's not really that many other things that the president officially does. Like, the last legal war that the United States has declared was on December 8th, 1941, when the president, when the U.S. officially declared war on, Japan. And that was Congress that has that role. The president doesn't even have the power to declare war. So all these other wars, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq twice, Afghanistan, those are all not official wars. Even though they're called the Korean War, the Vietnam War, they were just actions by the president. They were never approved by Congress. So I'm not even sure, what the presidency does.
Yeah. Well, I also want to make it clear that, you know, Trump is also has his issues and, you know, has lots of problems. So I want to make it clear that I'm not on either side. If anyone is trying to
we were suspicious.
find out if I was. I wish we could just like quickly put Eric Adams into being president. Right away.
And so you wonder, like, when was the last time? I mean, you could argue. I think Obama showed a lot of qualities of leadership. I think, you know, whether you like him or not, Reagan probably showed qualities of leadership. You know, Johnson, Kennedy, Eisenhower all showed, Truman, Roosevelt all showed qualities of leadership. So they're not all horrible, even though they all have issues, and you might not agree with their political issues or economics.
It's just that system. It's the system that's so just terrible right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, I was talking to someone this weekend about all these race issues that we're confronting and how much of it are systemic, like built into the system. And if you even look at the Constitution and you look at everything, what was the reason for the Electoral College? The reason for the Electoral College was because the North was more populated than the South. So in order to protect slave owners' rights, they created the Electoral College. What's the reason the First Amendment has freedom of speech? Well, it's been probably used most to enforce the rights of people like in the KKK that have freedom of speech. The rights to bear arms, Second Amendment. This was so that slave owners could carry guns to keep slaves from, you know, rebelling. Even, you know, issues like the, I think it's the 14th Amendment or the 13th Amendment, the amendment that freed slavery, you know, prevented slavery except in the cases where someone is convicted of a crime and goes to jail, which is why there's forced labor and crime, which is a form of slavery, and there's more African Americans in jail than Caucasians, even though African Americans only represent 12% of the population. So it seems like systemic racism is just baked into the Constitution. And so when you start to ask, like, what can we do about this? The problem hasn't been changed since years, you know, decades and even centuries. So, you know, I hope that there is leadership that comes up and stops or slows down these riots. It's something that is generally worrisome. And then kind of the underlying causes, not only law enforcement racism, but just racism, you know, of all races and sexes and so on, all over the country.
And I feel like, you know, as a white person, I mean, we just don't realize, you know, what people go through that are African American. I mean, just by their color of their skin. I mean, you just have to really we just have no idea. And it's like, you've got to really think about this. And like you said, you know, with what you're doing, you know, looking at the Constitution, I mean, it's scary. And I think it's just, gosh, we just need that change. I mean, we really have to really understand what's happening in this country.
Yeah, like
all over the world. I mean, this is happening all over the world. I mean, it's just terrible.
Yeah, like I didn't realize this, but tipping, the reason why you tip waiters and waitresses, among other things, tipping as a custom started because of racism. So in the 1800s, owners of the railways didn't want to have to pay such high wages to the porters and you know, waiters on the trains and so on, and those were mostly African Americans and Asian Americans, so they paid them less and they encouraged people to tip in order to make up for the lost compensation of these minorities. So and that's how so many things that we take for granted as part of our system, and we say, oh, it's not racist, we do this all the time, I tip huge. All these things are kind of baked into this systemic racism, and that's why when you have this pandemic, again, for better or for worse, people start to thinking and they start to get angry and they start to question, and so that's why they go out on the streets and they try to raise awareness. Well, I think what Martin Luther King famously said, you know, the reason people riot is because they feel unheard. And I think what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was able to do was, in 1968, was to make people feel heard, that he heard them. And, you know, sadly, he was going to win the presidency in 1968, and as soon as he secured the nomination, he was assassinated that very day. Jay, did you send the question of the day? Let's see. J, link to IG Live questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Would I be open to doing another Ask Altucher short form podcast? Yes. Ask questions right here. This is like an Ask Altucher right here. We're answering the questions. This is these. If you ask a question, we will say your name. And by the way, your name in this case was Freund with Benefits. Very clever name. Your IG Instagram name is Freund, Freund with Benefits. Would you be open to doing another Ask Altucher short form podcast? And the answer is yes, but that's what we're doing right here. These are being rolled up by Jay into a podcast. Okay. Jay, is there really not more questions than this? You only have like 2 questions down here. And I know people ask more questions. All right. James, what is the Ty Lopez? No, I'm not going to answer that right now. I don't feel like it. What age should one start talking to their children about sex or relationships? I'll just tell you what happened with me. So when I was 12 or 13, I got really obsessed with breakdancing. And one of the moves of breakdancing is where you start to move your hand and like this. So this was often considered an effeminate gesture. So at the age of 13, I was showing my dad some of my breakdancing moves, which I probably shouldn't have. And the only question he asked is, you could tell me, are you gay? And
Why are you there?
That's the only thing he told me. That's the only thing he asked me. That was the entire sex discussion between me and my father. And I said no. And he's like, okay, but you know that what you're doing with your hand is gay. This is my dad talking. And, that was...
That's our generation.
I was horrified. It's the only thing I remember about him, really. I can't even remember what he looks like while he is asking me this question. But I can remember how horrified and embarrassed I was. I was 13 years old, and I like girls. I remember he had on his bookshelf these great books. There was Wifey by Judy Blume, who got on my podcast eventually. I begged her to come on my podcast, but there was Wifey by Judy Blume. There was a book called Candy by Terry Southern, and it was about this highly sexualized, it seemed to me at the time, woman named Candy. And there was a book by William Goldman called Boys and Girls Together that had a lot of sexual things going on. There was Looking for Mr. Goodbar. I forget who wrote it, Judith Rosner maybe. But anyway, it was about a woman who falls in love with 2 men. One was this boring lawyer named James, and the other was this exciting guy who she met in a bar, and it was very sexual, the relationship we had with him. And she was going back and forth between James and the exciting guy. So I automatically thought that for the rest of my life, I'm not going to be the exciting guy. And I really wanted to be the Mr. Goodbar that every woman would be looking for. And I would just, and then they had, on their bookshelf, just exposed to the world, was a book called ESO, Extended Sexual Orgasm. So it was this guidebook for my parents, I guess, to have an extended sexual orgasm. So they never had the sexual conversation with me, but I would stay home from school. I would skip school, and I would just spend all day from 5th grade on just reading these books over and over again. Like I must have read Candy 30 times, and Extended Sexual Orgasm 100 times, and they just had all these great books. There was this great book. It was like in the 70s. There were all these pop psychology books written for the masses by psychologists. There was one book, Don't Say Yes, and it's not like I have a great memory. It's just that I read these books 1,000 times. But there was this one book on their bookshelf called Don't Say Yes When You Want to Say No. But it was about all these women who would say yes to sex when they should have said no. And they would tell all their stories in the book. So I would read all these. This was my pornography. Like I never looked at Penthouse or Hustler or Playboy. I never saw those magazines at all growing up. But reading, a psychology book, Don't Say Yes When You Want to Say No. That was my pornography when I was in 5th grade. And the only other thing I'll say is, when I first, this is too graphic, but when I first had a wet dream, I was worried that the sperm was still in my stomach, and if they ever did surgery on me and would see all this sperm in my stomach, that people would think I was gay. That I would just remember thinking that. But anyway, what can you do?
Well, to answer the question.
Oh yeah, actually,
I think
you should actually answer the question.
At a very young age, and you need to let them know the names, to be anatomically correct with the names of your body. Let them understand, so that if anyone does try to, molest them, they're able to, talk
identify.
to you and identify. There's all sorts of videos that I had my kids watch when they were really little, all the way up, about pregnancy and about these things. So I think it's really important to teach your kids. I wasn't taught. I think in our generation, parents didn't talk about that kind of stuff. But I think it is very important to do that starting at a very young age.
Yeah. So what age did you? What age would you have the sex conversation with? Let's say a girl, or you have two daughters, you have one son.
3, 4 years old.
You know who agrees with you? The World Health Organization, says start at the age of 4 talking to your kids about masturbation and gender roles. So you kind of agree with the WHO.
We didn't do the gender roles, but it's just we just talked about how it works and everything. So it's not a big deal.
I feel like I'd be too awkward to talk to my kids about this stuff, but I think that's like the role for the No?
My late husband and I did it with them together. It was really important.
I did not do it with my kids together. I'm not as good.
Oh.
So, question from Brandon. Oh, first off, someone asked, I forgot the name, but someone asked, what kind of insurance do I have? So, I do not have health insurance or life insurance or any kind of insurance. And I don't think I ever have. Like maybe when I had a full-time job in the 90s, I had health insurance just because it's being part of the job. But I've never had health insurance, and I haven't been to a doctor. I haven't been to a regular doctor since I was 16 years old. I've been to a therapist, but not like an actual doctor. And I think, I used to think that was because I was super healthy. But I think now it's because I'm a hypochondriac. Like I'm so afraid that I actually am sick from something that I don't want to go to a doctor and have them tell me. And also I don't want to be examined by a doctor. It's been 36 years since I've been examined by a doctor. I feel like weird with somebody touching me. Like I don't want to go to a doctor. So I don't have health insurance, and maybe I should because now I'm getting a little older, and you're supposed to check for things like prostate cancer and colon stuff. I don't want to be checked for these things. And
you should.
Yeah?
Yeah. And I have insurance, so.
Can I get your insurance? No?
How
do I figure it out? I don't even know how to get insurance.
I'm going to help you get it, so.
Like, do you have to get like a blood test and stuff to get insurance? You can just sign up, but don't they check for illnesses?
No. You don't do that anymore.
What if I have a pre-existing condition?
It doesn't matter. They have to insure you. So
where's my Obamacare? Don't I have national? Can I?
I'm not sure, but anyway, you can get health insurance, and I would recommend getting like a high deductible. I don't know. That's what I do.
So like that means you
have to spend a certain amount, like $5,000 a year before it kicks in. So it's really for catastrophic circumstances. Yeah. So if you have cancer or an illness like this, that you just pay out of pocket the $5,000 and then they cover the rest. So, but you also though get a yearly physical free.
Yeah.
So with that, so if you have a cold or virus or flu or whatever, you go to the doctor, you have to pay that. But I think just catastrophic insurance, I think is a good idea.
I remember one time I asked Nassim Taleb. He wrote this book, Anti-Fragile, how if something hurts you, you can always bounce back stronger if you figure out how to be anti-fragile. But he was talking about the economy. And I said to him, I feel afraid, like if I ever get really sick, I'm going to be very fragile because I'm going to be the biggest baby in the world. I'm going to be so terrified of getting sick that I won't bounce back stronger. And he kind of suggested maybe I should poison myself a little bit each day. Half jokingly, I think he said it. But there's some sense to that. Like, you kind of, like, I know I'm psychologically stronger because I bounced back from a lot of psychological conditions, and I'm financially stronger because I bounced back from a lot of financial situations. But physically, I don't know how I would react if I got sick, like really sick.
Well, the thing is, though, is this: if you don't have some sort of insurance, that you could, it could bankrupt somebody. I mean, it's cost thousands and thousands of dollars if you have something that's really terrible, and you want to protect yourself from that.
Yeah, and I guess like if you got hit by a car and broke your leg and ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks, how much do you think that would cost?
Oh, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Really?
I mean, it's the system. The system is broken. That system is broken too, because they do all sorts of things, and everything is just 100 times more expensive than normal, because they know most people have insurance, that the insurance companies are going to pay for it. It's just this ongoing cycle of BS. But no, it's the hospital that charges so much money every day for you to stay in there, and then they add things that you don't really even need, and they just stick it in there. Like a test for $500, or everyone should look at their bills when you leave the hospital, because you're going to find all sorts of things that really you didn't ask for, or you didn't need. It's ridiculous.
That's why I think there's a good business opportunity called medical advocacy. So you don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to be a registered nurse, but if you're a part of a company that does medical advocacy, when someone gets really sick, they call you up, you go to the hospital, and so it's not a family member, it's someone who has some connections to doctors, but just knows how to listen to the doctors always say things that you don't understand, right? And they say, well, you need this test, this test, this test, and doesn't mention the prices. It's like going to an expensive restaurant where they don't have the prices on the menu. And you should have a medical advocate that says, oh no, he has a virus, you don't need to give him an antibiotic. Or no, he has a stomachache, you don't need to check his ears, or whatever they do. So someone should be there,
or a $100 Q-tip.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that they charge ridiculous prices for these things that it's just not fair.
Look at how many. I have a friend who went to the hospital recently, and they told him, "Hey, we could do this surgery for you. No big deal. It's nothing." And then it's a year later, he's still recovering from this surgery. They always convince. That's why I'm terrified to go to a doctor. Once you enter to the doctor's world, you kind of outsource to them all authority over your body.
Well, you shouldn't, actually.
Yeah, but I'm afraid I'll do that because it's the doctor.
I won't let that happen.
All right, you can be my medical advocate. Brandon Webb says, how do you see... So Brandon Webb's been on my podcast several times. Former Navy SEAL. He also ran the shooting school, the sniper school that taught everybody, like the American Sniper, how to shoot. So great guy. He's written a couple of best-selling books. The last one was Mastering Fear. Brandon, welcome to the podcast. That's it right there is Brandon. And question is, how do you see the U.S. economy over the next 24 months, and what opportunities might exist? That's a really great question. So a couple of answers. One is, everybody says, over the week, last week, Nouriel Roubini, who's a famous economist, he said we're entering into a long-term depression. Well, he's wrong. And he's been wrong ever since 2002. He's been saying the depression is around the corner. He's been saying this for 18 years. He was almost correct in 2009. I debated him on July 6, 2010, where I said the market's going up. He said the market's going down. He was wrong. But here's the thing. Right now, we're certainly in a recession. A recession is defined as 2 quarters in a row of declining growth in the GDP is less GDP than the quarter before. So the economy grows negatively for 2 quarters in a row. So Q1, we shrunk by about an annualized 5%. This quarter, we're going to shrink by an annualized 40%. And that's the 2 quarters. Q3, where the economy is going to grow. How do I know this? Well, Q3 starts on, it's the 3rd quarter of the year. It starts on July 1st, so a month from today. And already, airline tickets have bounced. Restaurant reservations have bounced up. They're 50% higher. Even job losses. More people now have gone back to their jobs than filed for unemployment last week. So an extra 2 million people filed for unemployment last week, but 3.8 million people went back to their jobs last week. Because as economies reopen, in order, there was $500 billion of these small business loans given out, these PPP loans, and you have to use 60% of these loans to rehire your employees. So employees are getting rehired. Now, in some cases, they're not because they still are taking care of their kids. In some cases, they're not because the jobs are gone permanently, like if the restaurant went out of business. And in some cases, they're not because they're making more money because of unemployment benefits, but that's going to stop at the end of July. So those unemployment benefits end at July 31st, the extra government benefits. So what's going to happen is you're going to see, now it's coming off a low base. It's not like we're back to where we were. We probably won't be back to where we were for a few years, but we're going to start to see huge movement in the economy, Q3 and Q4. It's going to be undeniable. So the recession is going to be one of the shortest recessions in history, because when you throw $6 trillion at the economy, the $6 trillion doesn't just float in the air and disappear. That $6 trillion will be spent. Some of it's going to be spent immediately. Some of it's already been spent. So everybody who got the direct stimulus check of $1,200, that money's probably already been spent in the economy. Anyone who's going to be getting the PPP benefits of the PPP loans and unemployment insurance, that's going into the economy. And then over the next few quarters, the Federal Reserve cutting rates so much, that's going to be felt by the economy as people buy more houses, take out more loans, invest in the stock market, and so on. So the economy is going to start growing in Q3. It's not going to be back to normal. Normal was 3 to 3.5% unemployment. We're not going to see that for a good 4 years at least. Probably correctly, because a lot of businesses have gone out of business. A lot of businesses were hired too many people, and so on. So it's going to feel sluggish, but the economy itself is going to move up for at least the next 10 to 20 quarters, because you can't help but go up with there's a saying, don't fight the Fed. You can't help but have the economy go up with trillions of dollars being spent. Now, does that mean everything's going to be rosy and we're going to be back to normal in a quarter? No. You even see in the states that have opened up, they can't fill their restaurants. It's legally only 25% or 50% to capacity. Air travel's not fully back. Hotels are not fully back. I mean, Carnival cruises, I don't know if they're ever going to be fully back, but they're offering $28 a night to go on a cruise, which you could go on that forever, and it's probably cheaper than your rent. You could just stay on a cruise forever. And if you use one of these side hustles or a bunch of side hustles, you could probably make more money living on a cruise line and eating for free at the buffet line. Americans are number one in the world for getting people back to the buffet line. And so cruise lines are I would go, if I had nothing else to do, I would just go live on a cruise line and travel the world, eat for free, and do side hustles.
But that's a big problem with our food. It's like people aren't healthy.
Yeah,
So
well, you have to control yourself.
The food in the buffet lines.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that. Like, here's my favorite food.
Fresh food is like it's cheaper than processed food.
Fresh food is cheaper. If we go out to the farmer's market, that's usually pretty cheap.
Right.
But here's my vegan pork rinds. These are pigless pork rinds called Pig Out, and the company's Outstanding Foods. I'm biased. I'm an investor, but also Snoop Dogg is an investor as well. Those are his munchies when he gets high, as he eats these Outstanding Foods. So this IG Live, sponsored by Outstanding Foods, the vegan chips. But in terms of the economy, 24 months from now, I do think we start to see a steady rise. Even though there's going to be a second wave or a second season of pandemic, they're never going to shut down again. They saw the results of shutting down. It's not going to happen again. They'll figure out other solutions like masks, social distancing.
You think?
I do think, because this was just, I think everybody thinks at the highest level of government that this shutdown was wrong. Here's the problem with 40 million people unemployed, is that the unemployed have a death rate, have a mortality rate 9 times higher than the employed. So you can't, there's going to be more people die from 40 million jobs lost than died from coronavirus. The final data, which we'll see, we won't see it for a year or so, the final data is going to show that. And that's really sad and it's really horrible. And I blame Democrats and Republicans. I feel they bullied each other into that, and it's a shit show right now. Yeah. But in terms of opportunities, you know, this is, you know, and this doesn't, I don't intend to give anyone a homework assignment. This is a perfect time to start a business. But we've talked before about kinds of businesses you could start. 2 weeks ago, I talked about start a coronavirus compliance business, and I summarized that again last week. And then the $10 million business I described just on Friday, and Jay will put out the podcast in a day or so. But the $10 million business we described was consolidating all these very tiny, cheap e-commerce websites that are for sale on sites like flippa.com and empireflippers.com. And I explained a rationale of how you can make $10 million within 24 months if you do a strategy like that. Same thing for coronavirus compliance. This week I will have another $10 million business idea. But don't forget about all the side hustles we've talked about here. So I've described 3 different book challenges. So last week I described a book challenge. And remember, when you write a book, you don't have to publish with a major publisher. Here's the problems with doing mainstream publishing. You need to get an agent. You need to get an editor who likes your book. You need to get a marketing department and a publisher who likes your book. Then the publisher has to decide. Then the publisher and your agent make a legal deal about you. Then bookstores have to like your book. Then you have to convince a PR firm to like your book, and so on. And then you have to write a 250-page book, a 60,000-word book. That's history. That's ancient history. Bookstores might not even exist a year from now. Barnes & Noble was already... Remember, the main theme of the new abnormal is acceleration. Barnes & Noble was already going out of business. Like every time we went to the Barnes & Noble 3 blocks away, it had fewer and fewer books in it, fewer tables with books. So that's the same thing that happened to Borders 10 years ago. So I already know Barnes & Noble is going to go out of business. But now, instead of it going out of business 5 years from now, it's probably going to go out of business within the next year, is my guess. And so it's not like being in a traditional... So the reason I'm mainstream publishing my next book, which comes out next March, is that I wanted to be in the traditional bookstores again instead of always going through Amazon. But now that might be a mistake because Amazon is going to be the last man standing in the bookstore business. And so with Amazon, the definition of a book changes. Just like we've talked before about how the definition of a restaurant has changed, the definition of a book has changed. So Brandon and I are good friends with Kamal Ravikant. He wrote a book, Love Yourself as If Your Life Depends on It. His first version of that book was written in 2010 or 2011. And it was just, instead of 60,000 words, which is what a publisher would require, it was 8,000 words. And it was a bestseller. It sold 1 million copies. I know he would have been able to pay his rent with it. Like, it was generating a lot of money. And he was able to create an audiobook, a paperback. I don't know if he did a hardcover, but he did a Kindle. And there was many opportunities for him to make money, not just the book itself. But that showed me that the definition of a book has changed. You could write a book that's just 10 pages. You could write a book that's just 5,000 words, and you get a cover and you upload it to Amazon, and boom, it's a Kindle, it's a paperback. You could sell the foreign rights. Like Choose Yourself, which I self-published. I've sold the foreign rights in something like 25 countries. You don't need a mainstream publisher to do that. So on Choose Yourself, I've made money by selling the Kindle. I made money from the paperback. I've made money from the hardcover. I've done special marketing deals where I've bundled it with other products. I make money. This is 7 years later. Actually, 7 years tomorrow. Choose Yourself. It's the anniversary of the book Choose Yourself. I make money every month from Audible still. More money than I've ever made from any other book. I make every month from the audiobook of Choose Yourself. So you do not need a mainstream publisher. So we've talked about these. I've given 3 different book challenges. I'll summarize one of them, but the reason why I'm summarizing these is that content creation is the biggest opportunity right now, because people are looking for content. People are looking for stories. They're looking for TV shows. They're looking for YouTube channels. They're looking for online courses. They're looking for online newsletters. They're watching news for the first time in years. So by all means, write a book now to establish expertise and create consulting opportunities, speaking opportunities, coaching opportunities, other business opportunities, podcast opportunities. So I gave a book challenge. Pick a category that you love. So for instance, Brandon was in the Navy SEALs. Brandon, I would ask you, what are the best 101 military heroes or leaders of all time? What are the 101 best military leaders in history? And the reason why I say that was when I was a kid, there was this great book called The 101 Most Influential People in History. All my friends and I, we bought this book and we would argue who was more influential, Jesus or Aristotle or Moses or Hitler, because they're all influential. And it would be big arguments, and we loved this book. So pick a category you love. And again, I would suggest for Brandon, the 101 most important military leaders in world history. And then write a paragraph or two describing why they're important. Write a paragraph or two why you think they're important. So who they are, why they're important, why they're on this list, and maybe a personal story about how that leader affected you personally, like what lessons you draw from it that you can apply to your life. And so that category, so the reason why you can give these book challenges is everyone can write this book, except I might write who's the 101 best, I don't know, religious leaders of all time, or who's the 101 best politicians of all time, or who's the 101 best parents of all time. Robin would be number one. Who's the 101 best cooks, chefs of all time? And you write a little bio, some recipes, what happened for you when you tried those recipes. 101 best, entrepreneurs of all time. And so you write that, then you could do a podcast about entrepreneurship, then you could give a TEDx talk about the 101 best entrepreneurs of all time, then you could do coaching, you can do a new online newsletter or an online course about entrepreneurship. So again, it's the spoke and wheel approach. Entrepreneurship, or military leadership, or cooks, or parents, or at the wheel, and then the spokes come out. So here's the podcast spoke, here's the sequel of the new book spoke, here's an online course, an online newsletter, coaching, consulting, speaking opportunities, all of those things. So for me, in 2002, I got obsessed with investing. So I started a hedge fund. I started writing about investing. I wrote books about investing. I gave TED Talks about investing. I started consulting about investing. I started coaching about investing. I was day trading my own money. So it's the spoke and wheel approach. And to this day, I still get opportunities with investing. The spoke and wheel approach will drive you a long way. So think about, I always ask these questions. Who are you? Why are you? Why now? So, and Brandon, I'm still answering your question. Who you are as a person, you grew up with a lot of struggle and a lot of strife in your life. And then you have amazing stories, which you've written about in your bestsellers, about your experience in the military. You have a content creation company now about Navy SEALs, and the news and so on. And now, why are you is you're all about content creation and helping people with these stories from the military. Why now is maybe in this world that we're sorely lacking in leadership, maybe it would be great to read a 20-page book, a 40-page book about the 101 best military leaders. Maybe there's lessons we can all learn, and you're the best person to kind of take the lessons from those military leaders and bring it to us. And again, it doesn't have to be a 1,000-page book. It could be a 100-page book. And if you take 2 or 3 of these people a day and just write a few paragraphs, you're going to be done with the book in 30 days. So it's another 30-day book challenge. You go to 99 Designs, you get a cover, and boom, you have the cover. And you upload it to Amazon. You can publish. Publishing a book, whether you're a writer or not, publishing a book is like a business card. If somebody had to decide, if TEDx LA had to decide between Brandon's Brandon is also taking advantage of what you said about health. I co-founded tigergummies.com, vitamins for kids. Brandon, you have to send some of these gummies over. Who knows what other ingredients are them? So Brandon, you know what would be interesting? I want to interview you about your vitamins. How does somebody, because there are all these factories that will white label vitamins for you. They will take the ingredients that you want, like, oh, everybody needs vitamin D, they need NAC, they need vitamin B12, and then that'll boost their immune system. So you have like the COVID immune gummy bears for kids. And I'd like to know how someone could do that from scratch. We'll have you on an IG Live that will turn into a podcast. And so, Brendan, what do you think of my book idea? You should write I would read it from you, the 101 best military leaders of all time. Will you write that book? It'll take you 30 days. So you can even talk it into a recorder and then have a transcript. If you're not a writer, you could talk it into a recorder. No direct to consumer. All right, I'll have to ask you about it. So, good, Brandon. We're going to talk about the 101 best military leaders and kids for gummy bears for kids as your post-COVID. And I want you to describe how you would create, because I've thought about this before. How do you create a nutraceutical or a vitamin that you could sell? And I think that's an interesting category. It's just like if we wanted to create a clothing line around pajamas, copper-infused pajamas, I don't know how to do it. So you took the initiative and you did it. And I think there's a lot of opportunities like that. So we know the main themes in the post-COVID economy are acceleration. So everything that was going to happen 10 years from now is going to happen in the next 2 years. Remote. So everything that was going to happen, everything that could be remote will go remote. So Brandon's gummy bears, I can't go to the store and buy them. I have to order them somehow. The stores are not going to happen. So, remote is going to be a big part of what's happening. Like, think about restaurants, and we've talked about this before. A restaurant is no longer a physical location. Oh, we're almost done. A restaurant is no longer a physical location with chairs and tables and so on. It's a menu. So I can go to a legal kitchen called a commissary kitchen or a cloud kitchen. I can rent some space in the kitchen for a fraction of the cost it would cost to rent restaurant space. I can then make my menu. I'm going to call it James's Sushi-ritos, where I just have burritos with sushi in it. And I'm going to upload the menus to Grubhub and Uber Eats. I'll see how many people order. If enough people order, I'll keep that restaurant going. If people don't order, maybe I'll create 5 more restaurants. A restaurant is just a menu. A book now is no longer a 250-page book. It's anything uploaded to Amazon. Gummy bears are not something that you buy from a main brand in the food store. It's something that now it's going to be ordered remotely online, and you could make it white label using factories that are licensed to do these things and so on.
And
so
hopefully here in the States.
Hopefully here in the States as well. And so, other opportunities, I think there's going to be opportunities for anybody who is an expert. So there's, writing books, creating podcasts, creating YouTube videos. Everybody should double down on content. We've talked about lots of side hustles, but I think there's going to be a democratization of education. So online courses, online newsletters. I'll talk more about online newsletters this week, but I've talked significantly about it. I think that's a great way as well. We have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Let me see if there's one more question I can quickly answer. How this all affects stocks. Stocks have been going up ever since I said stocks were going to start going up. Now, I don't take credit for it. It's just there's so much money in the economy, stocks in the long run will go up. What advice for a computer science community? Take courses on big data and AI and mobile apps, and you will do exceedingly well as people start creating more and more remote apps, particularly apps relating to privacy. How do you negotiate buying a business? I'll talk all about my top 10 ideas for negotiation tomorrow. Speed reading, I will talk about tomorrow. I have a specific technique for speed reading. Do you narrate the book on Audible? Good question, Victoria. I will talk about that tomorrow. So, a bunch of questions for tomorrow. Telemedicine stocks are going to do well, but also telemedicine platforms. Believe me, we're in inning 0 of Zoom for medicine. So I will talk more about that tomorrow. Will you join me tomorrow on IG Live? So 25 seconds left. I'll save this on IGTV. We're going to put it on YouTube and we'll make it a podcast. We'll put it on YouTube today. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you 2 p.m. tomorrow.